to ask questions as well. Okay, let me close this. I have so many tabs already. So many thingies. Okay, where is our thing? Okay, so we started with urban design. So it is really the study of public domain, and basically even simpler, the space between buildings. So let me save this image here. So we have like a visual aid. And then we have the history here, starting out with like ancient history, basically very focused on geometry. Dividing land was important because that's how people would sort of get earnings or like basically develop themselves. So if you own more land, even back then, that means you were like a king or like someone important. And then with the land you have, you could like create your own food, and you can hire like servants, sell the food for money, and like get even more servants, get even more land, etc., etc. And then we had sort of like um, no other word for it, a renaissance, both in the actual history and then a renaissance in urban planning, where the Renaissance architects and builders used principles from like Roman architecture and even like combinations of like um, Muslim and like Islamic architecture, and like basically also architectures from different parts of the world to create sort of this order, like what should be in a city, how should we design our public spaces. And as we found out, the plaza is really the most important place in a city. It's a public plaza because it's a place where people gather, people like see each other, the government like sort of supposedly um, showcases that they're putting the best interest of the people like in mind, like basically not just designing for the elite, but also for general, for all the people. And then the public plaza would be the location for where you have your church, you have the public offices, and basically everybody gathers there. Everyone important is there, and also everyone who are the least important also gather there. So it kind of like enriches the city where like everyone, regardless of class, can come together and enjoy the space. And then further developments in the 1900s basically break different ways of breaking down the different elements of a city. You have the path, edge, district, node, landmark. This was by Kevin Lynch. And now there's even more subtlety and more sort of like nuance in how public space is designed. So we're thinking about the uses, the mixing of uses, the importance of pedestrian zones, the regulation of like vehicles, and like the importance of basically spaces where the city can breathe, not just like an open plaza like devoid of vegetation, but also there has to be some kind of vegetation as well, especially in a very built up area. And then we have like the movements of the urban task force, like talking about mixed use neighborhoods, but this is a bit more on planning. So how do you actually develop these mixed use neighborhoods? Um, what do you call this? That's why we are talking about the urban design process, basically evaluating what we have. For example, are your city maps? I think we'll need to do a callback to that. Like you already did this, and then just analyzing now with your knowledge of plazas and streets, you can like evaluate where could be places that could be improved or where are places that should be maintained. And then we had like history of urban planning over here, urban planning and design in like Cebu City, because like this is the data that I have. I don't know about data in your specific local community, but at this scale, it's really more urban planning. So as I guess I keep on repeating, urban design is really the street level. So everybody did that for the most part. Pasara mga tao. I think only one or two are like having trouble with that. And then the process of designing for people. So as architects, we are thinking about just our building and not the surroundings. So really considering how our buildings are accessed. This is why our current plate, the bus terminal, is very much focused on accessibility and universal design, because we were trying to put the focus back on the people. So how do you create good design? You have order, unity, proportion, scale, rhythm, etc. And you have examples in Moten as well. Okay. Towns and buildings, just sort of talking about the 5 methods of composition. But before that, you have the two concepts, the informal and formal model. So with the what they call this, with both those models, the focus is really on the what they call this, on the people. Let me see. Let me double check. So this one specifically is the when we talked about positive elements in design, where either the building is positive element or the street is a positive element. We want the street to be the focus of the design. And then buildings and landscapes, that's where we talked about the formal and informal models. And each of these sort of five methods of composition, as we discussed, build on each other. So the do insert. Let's see. So the first one, let me just like make this here. Sorry, I'm just using this as visual aid now. So the first one, just determining whether your area has an informal or like formal building composition. So informal means like more sort of flexible, more sculptural forms, less unity basically. And the formal is classical model, like similar building heights, similar architectural styles. And then if you have either the formal or informal models, they can be arranged in either a simple geometric shape or the right angle. And then on a bigger scale, are these like sort of urban districts or urban sections designed according to axial compositions or spatial compositions. So axial composition sort of like recalls the concept one over here, where it's building positive, where the buildings are the main elements. And then the spatial compositions talk about like having the street or the public space as the main element. Okay, so we discussed very thoroughly on that. Essay writing, we even did a bit of that. So most of the essays were really good. Not most were okay. There were two or three that were really good, and maybe two or three that were not as good. And then the public plaza. Wait, let me double check my recording. Yes. And then the public plaza, really a gathering space, usually not really having any vegetation. So we need some kind of new plazas. As we discussed, there were five sort of forms of plazas: closed plaza, dominated plaza, group or linked, and then a nuclear plaza, meaning like it has a strong node. I think a nodal plaza would have been a better term. Like I keep thinking of nuclear as the other thing. So amorphous plaza without a sense of enclosure. So the example here that we didn't really get to discuss as much is New York Times Square. Okay, so if we look at New York Times Square here in Google Maps, so it doesn't really conform to, let me see, any of the four previous plaza types. Times Square. There it is. You can't even tell it's a plaza. It's more like a very busy intersection. So you notice the sense of enclosure isn't really provided by the buildings, but rather the billboards. All of the signages are more or less on the same height, but the proportions are very kind of large, like above human scale, where it's like 20 stories, 30 stories above. But this particular sort of sitting space here, oh, where'd they go? Okay. I think they closed this down. Just like, okay, no, it's not closed down. Just this like small sort of island here. It's not small. It's like maybe 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's see here. Yeah, there's an island here. I think they converted this recently, because if you look at Google Maps, this is still like a road. So there's a road here. Now there's an actual plaza here. I think this was like fairly new. So it doesn't have any proper enclosure. It's enclosed by on two sides what they call this vehicle road, and on the like two other sides pedestrian paths or pedestrian walkways. Let me see over here. Oh, so it's a road on three sides and a pedestrian walkway on the fourth side. And notice that while it doesn't conform to the previous four models, it's still a very like prominent sort of gathering space. And I think the biggest feature here is really the three walls of ads. Basically, I call them walls, but they're buildings. But the walls of ads here that basically act as an enclosed space. So if anything, it could probably fall under a dominated plaza, because you have the three walls here, and this part here is sort of like just open. So it could be like an anti-dominated plaza where the open space here is just a view to like more buildings, and the enclosure is really like the three walls of ads here. So that's what Amphorus is. It's like it doesn't fit within the four groups, and it's more contemporary and like but still very memorable, and like still functions primarily as a, what they call this, efficient movement, but also like gathering space. I think I need to edit this. Okay. So now that's basically plazas. And if we go to streets over here, let's see. I don't still don't have like a proper sort of lecture for this, or like module for this. But the main idea is that we always think of streets as for vehicles, but Moten is just like very strongly advocating that streets are really for people. So let's take a look at Guadalupe, for example. Guadalupe and Cebu, because there are Guadalupes around the world. A lot of us think that because we're on the cars, we're driving in cars, we're passengers in cars and jeeps, that this street, particularly Virama, this part of Virama, is very inefficient. Like, oh, it's making my traffic slow, it's making my car slow. But think about all the people who use the market space here, all the people who use the sidewalk here, all the people who cross BDO to get to the markets, all the people who sort of visit these spaces here. This is like almost even a sort of a mini plaza here, or like an actual plaza. Market, public area over here. And this market provides service not just to those people nearby, but almost like just from the number of visitors, what do you call this? A good chunk, like let's say the public market area here, the Banawa public market is like that big, but its area of service could be like this big because like a lot of people are using the jeeps, etc., etc. So anyway, what I'm trying to say is the slowing down of traffic is really not so much an inconvenience in terms of urban design. It's just a, what do you call that? I guess the complaints of the car dependent upper class, because the only people who are affected by the traffic here are the people who are trying to get to their homes over here. If you're like of the sort of lower income bracket, middle income brackets, you wouldn't be able to afford your own private car. So you would expect they'd be walking here or using public transportation to get here. Okay, so what Moten and me myself is trying to advocate is that we should rethink our spaces, not so much for vehicles, but really for people. The other issue here in this Banao public market is that it actually has a functioning sidewalk where on this sidewalk, people gather, communicate, talk to each other. The only problem is that it's dirty. That's the main issue with a lot of people coming together. So how do we make this sort of public plaza, this like urban design space better, like using the principles that we learned so far? So that's where we talk about the urban design guides, the building codes and the regulations, and then the principles we discuss about streets. So I actually don't have the videos up yet. They're still like downloading, or like they have downloaded, but I need to upload it to YouTube. So some of the biggest sort of factors that it's already like 228. Some of the biggest factors or key things you need to remember. If you don't remember anything, just remember this: the angle of elevation. So That's basically the angle where people's line of sight can really absorb the height of a building or your building design. And then streets and public spaces should take note of this angle of elevation. And as we discussed before, that Cebu City was very good at this back in the 70s. Excuse me. Where before we had the Capitol building easily viewable or easily seen from Fuente Osmeña Circle. And now, because of, I don't know, people who don't know urban design, people who know urban design are not being listened to, et cetera, people who think that tall buildings is a sign of urban development, like vehicles are the way to go. Now this view looks like this Capitol building, Fuente Osmeña. And maybe this view, like you don't have this view anymore. It's always like an aerial view looking at the Capitol. And then who gets to see this view? It's the people who are in what's a hotel here called? Um, what's a hotel there called? Can someone tell me? I forget. Crown Regency. So that view is very clearly from Crown Regency, like somewhere here. If you take a look at that, and then you take a camera, probably like that. This is probably most likely a view from Crown Regency or like one of these hotels here. Again, just highlighting the fact that for some reason, um, city planners or whoever's in charge of Cebu City have forgotten how to design for the people, like for the general public, and have instead focused on the like elite, the upper class, those with the money. I think the reason there is because they really have money. So our duty, our job as architects is to sort of shift that focus away. And of course, we're gonna get a lot of flack for it because like it's basically like we're throwing money away. But when in reality, it's really the most sustainable thing to do. Now, why do you think that's the most sustainable thing to do? I'll just let's see here. Let me open up my attendance sheet. AR3 233. Class workers. The class workers are still also on the way. I've managed to get up into the design samples here. Midterm exams still being recorded. And let's see, class participation. I still have it on paper, not on my Excel file. May 6. Okay. It's free for all now. So with all that recap, with your like knowledge of urban design and plaza and street design, plaza and street forms, how do you think we can get Fuente Osmeña Circle? Let me take a view here. How do we get that view back? What's going on? We can move a bit over here. Where is Capitol building? Can't even tell. Oh, there it is. I think I'll move over here. Here. How do we get that view back? So this is it today. This is it before. Like 1940s versus present. How do we get this back? So for class participation or attendance, the floor is yours. I think I'll just snip this. We don't keep going back and forth. Yep, please fill it in. Just use the chat box. We don't want to use the microphone. 21. We go to so many tabs already. Okay, just fill it in. I will read it in a bit. Save. 22. And it's very likely that your areas are not suffering the same problem, but have their own unique sort of situations. Probably a lot of you have like who are not in Cebu City have a lot of good urban places, urban spaces and places, and it's really more of a matter of maintaining those spaces. Okay, let me zoom in a bit here. Let me minimize this. Okay, I think that's it. Okay, so we got some answers in here. Wait. Oh, nobody answered. It was raising your hand. Okay. Please just use your microphone or raise your hand. Okay. To regain the view, Kabalba, I guess the only thing I can think of is cut the trees, maintain a certain height that will keep the line of vision. Really, yeah. It seems very kanang anti tree, but really these trees are not very good for maintaining sort of field of vision and like maintaining like a sense of place because it isolates the plaza. It separates it from the urban fabric. And then I think the reason why we're slowly sort of moving these trees away is like a lot of people are realizing that. Some of the sort of previous professors mentioned that at night, crime is very high here because people couldn't see what was happening behind the trees. And it was very dark. And like I think now they're like adding more light, reducing the trees really to like maintain the vision. And then, yep, that's basically it. Agree, Silence. The next step is how do we remove those trees? I'll put here Lance and uh, I'll say one. I'll just like use this as a metric. Half 1.4 kanang just mentioning in the chat and like 2 points for what do you call this? Actually giving a suggestion. Okay, we go. So just like think of some ideas. So in other words, though in another which is impossible, I think making the huge plaza like the one in Washington DC will make the people appreciate the view more. So increasing the plaza, maybe yes, yes. Let's talk about like if you could do it without any sort of if you became like the president of the Philippines and you had all the budget, how would you improve this? Actually, we can make that a quick activity. 235. We can actually just make this a very quick seat work. This I think this is much better than asking for people to comment. So what I want you guys to do very quickly, like 5 minutes long. This is very impromptu. So I would like you to get your Paint or your whatever photo editing software you have, screenshot, or even just snip. You can go here, use your snip tool if you're on Windows, and then just sort of draw where you want what you want to happen. So I'll just draw this line here, or I could just say remove the tree, something like that. So remove trees, something just remove. Maybe we can sort of add more sitting space here, or maybe yeah, I think sitting space would be the best. The problem is like how do we make it comfortable in the afternoon, like noontime? Maybe we need some like very light or like small like shaded areas, maybe like not really umbrellas, but something here. And then yeah, definitely the most obvious thing is to remove the trees. How do we move the trees? Maybe one by one, focusing on the areas that are highlighted here, something like that. And what else? Actually, scratch that. Maybe this will be our final project. How do we improve Fuentes Mania so that people won't be scrambling on their snips? Okay. So let's think about that. Let's see over here. Oops, not that one. How about this one? Okay. So think about how many are from Cebu City? Let's see. Could you raise your hand if you're from Cebu City? How do I have it so I can see everyone? 7 people. How many are from Cebu City? Please raise your hand and keep them raised because like we might need to wait a bit for everyone to raise their hands. Okay. Actually, for it to be a bit more in line with our design project, let's just do it in our with our design projects. Like in your design, how would you improve vistas to like I know the site doesn't have a lot of vistas. How would you improve the urban design with the goal of like giving people a view to the surrounding buildings? There's really the unfortunate thing about um, the SM site is really there's nothing there to view as. So I think your building has to be the highlight of the design. How do you get your building to become more sort of prominent in your design using the idea of like maximizing the angle of elevation for viewers? So the Capitol building is here. It also looks a lot closer. Now it looks very far away. Yeah, I don't know how they did this. Maybe it's just a wide lens shot of the camera and the new image over here. Wider, so remove the trees, which is very sad to say, but you really need to maintain the street views. Maybe some coverings over here. Maybe you don't need that much chairs. Maybe a little bit of covering for the chairs here. More comfortable. Maybe we have the steps here before. Maybe we can have some shrubbery here. Shrubbery here, something like that. Shrubbery here, something like that. But yeah, really, really remove the here. So this should be, if I take this, it should be gone. At least the trees that are blocking the view to the Front Tasmania Circle over here. Not Front Tasmania, the Capitol building over here. So we need to like make that pop out more. Okay. Let's call this AR3233 May 6 lecture. Oh, sorry, 240. Basically, the thing that we need to remember again is just, let's see here. Summary, urban design, equals public space. And who do we want to use, or who wants to use the public space is really people. So no longer public space for vehicles. Public space is for people. So the key thing here, what we learned from plazas is that they have to be, there's a limit to how big plazas can be. So limit plazas, limit size to, let's say, maybe 50 by 50 to like 150 by 50, maybe 200 max square. For streets, it's really, what do you call this? They should be gathering spaces as well. And then we learned about the angle of elevation of elevation. So Moulton would say 18 degrees, but some newer books would say 25 degrees. So the angle of elevation is you have your building here, you have a person standing here. The angle of elevation is like how far the distance is. Sorry, the angle of elevation would dictate how far your person should be in order to see your whole building. So let me like put that onto his head, or maybe I'll just make an eyeball here. An eyeball looking at the building. The angle is 18 to 25 degrees. So that's basically our whole semester. Plazas need to be limited in size, and streets are gathering spaces. And then we should have, whenever we design buildings, because we're also in architecture, we should allow for an angle elevation of 18 to 25 degrees of like for our whole building, or like at least maybe 3 out of the 4 sides of the building, especially in our bus terminal. So this let's just say, let's call it viewing distance. There isn't really a technical term for this. Viewing distance. So we need to maintain that. Our building. Seems like medyo slow ang mga tao today. Oh, there's a one here. Wait, that's for the Cebu thing, right? Let me stop presenting so I can see. There was only one person in Cebu? I think there's like a few. Again, can I see a show of hands for Cebu? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6, right? 1, 2, 3. I was expecting more. Maybe the rest are from like, not from Cebu, but like Liloan or something. Yeah. Probably a good reason why we should focus on your urban design, not your urban design, your architectural design plate instead of like Fuentes Mania. Okay. So let's see here. For our final project, it will be combination, I think more essay type. Sorry, we didn't really get to talk about the standards. Essay type, application of urban design standards in your bus terminal. And I think, oh man, there's still that one student, Paglinawan. There she is. Ooh, it's kind of hard. Maybe I'll just give you a reading assignment, and then that will be sort of, we'll get a presentation from you. Probably by, let's see, you skipped out on 2 presentations. Maybe we can have 1 big presentation for you. Plus, I don't want to hassle you as much as you're already graduating na. Let's see, I'm looking at my screen here. Atong final class is 27. That's probably our exam day. Our essay maybe should be on the 23rd. And then maybe we can have a couple of presentations. Let's see for you. Hazel, do you still have your old plates, like from your 4th year and 3rd year?
I don't think I do. Wala na siguro, sir.
Wala na. Ang sa may naanin mo na plate karon, ang thesis na pa?
Naa pang thesis, sir. Wala man tugbati, sir. Di ba ko confident to.
Okay, that is nice something. Nice something lang ba? So we'll use that instead for you sa imuhang essay. So your old thesis. So instead of our, kay sila bus terminal man lang gi-design karon. So mo na bus terminal. In your case, imuhang thesis.
Okay,
And
sir.
then we'll do something. Sorry, I really ran out of time here. Just say mo ng privilege as 5th year na kuan. Dili na kakailangan mo ba itong reporting, but I'll give you something later on. Okay, I really don't know what to do. Application over design for in your bus terminal. So let's see here. How do we structure this? So part 1 will be the introduction of your. Okay, let's do the introduction next. So what is the meat of your design? The meat of your essay. So body. So let's call this. How can urban design standards be applied in your design? Like I don't like project. Think about sort of where can is there an appropriate viewing distance? So that's the angle of the elevation applied to like how people can view your building. Of your building. Let's see. Does your building take into account the surrounding area, like like building heights, vistas, etc. Another question here would be, does your building have a space for public gathering? So this could be plaza, park, and like a well-designed, or let's say proper streets. Finally, does your building encourage people to move around it, or is it catering to vehicles? And then your conclusion here, there's no right or wrong. You can say yes or no, or like based on your discussion, yes or no. Justify with examples from your kanang body text. Body paragraph. I just have some people be confused what I mean by body. So body here, body, conclusion, and then end with a call to action, or like promise to action, right? So if you say yes, how will you maintain or like how will you continue to design in this way? To keep designing with people in mind. If no, what do you need to change in the way you design spaces? Wait, and then your introduction should be summarize what you are about to discuss. You can say, for example, in this essay, I will this essay, or I think much better example. This essay will discuss how my project successfully or unsuccessfully, let's put here. I don't know about my spelling anymore. Unsuccessfully applied principles of urban design. So this is just like a preview. I'll make it official maybe like next week. So this is something for you to think about. Okay, so what, I have like only 10 minutes left. I'm sorry, like I couldn't use the whole time because I'm being called again for another meeting at 3 o'clock. So what are these urban design standards? So let's look at the building code. I think this is the most familiar. So if we go down here near the middle, somewhere a bit more here. So this is section 7. G1, figure 8 G1 under easements. So we have sidewalks, carriageways, promenades. So promenades are basically just wider sidewalks. This is more waterfronts. Easements like refer to waterfronts. Do we have, let's see here. We have the water line over there. Maybe this is where I can introduce the waterfronts. I'll handle the waterfronts because like we already had 2 rounds of like presentations. Maybe we can get Paglinawan to help me with this. And then over here, we have view corridors and sight lines. The carriageway portion of road right-of-way shall be free of structures, particularly commercial signs that will impede view corridor and the sight line. See figure 8G4. So I think we'll see that here. So this is the 8G4. So this is already in the law, but for some reason, we didn't apply it in the Fuente Osmeña Circle. Like the important building here, important viewing, view/vista, significant built or natural structure, formation, and the like. But they did not apply this in Fuente Osmeña. Like clearly it says here, the road right of way. Let me go back again. Sorry. Clearly on view corridor, section B of the building, section B of, what do you call this? Sorry. Section, I think this is under, it's not even 811 is artificial ventilation. Guidelines on easements, view corridors. This is a different section. I think this is still under, definitely not anymore under artificial ventilation, but it's its own section. Basically, the easements, view corridors, sight lines, street, road, right-of-way section of the building code, which is in section 8, already says that we should maintain these things. We should protect our sight lines, corridors, and important vistas. Pero as we all know, the immediate sort of monetary gain is not very apparent, so it's not maintained. Whereas if it was maintained, we would have more tourist sites because like that's how these vistas like generate economic income or like activity. But it's very long term, and like with the way urban planning and design is being done today, the ideas are very short term. Like how can we get money right away? And then like it's usually each sort of public project is in line with a new mayor, and I think very timely with our elections. If you're going to vote for someone, for someone who's willing to look long term, who has the sort of, again, very sort of generic ideas of like promoting like the welfare of the public. If they have like track records of like creating sort of good public works in your local community, vote for that. For me, specifically, just personally, like more important ang mayors kaysa president. Because whatever the president does, it really only affects the Luzon area. Rarely, I think, in my sort of 30-ish years of life in Cebu, can I say that the president of the Philippines really affected life in Cebu. Maybe gas prices is the biggest thing, but the mayor is really what affects our local community. And in terms of urban design, the mayor and the LGUs are the ones really in charge of how these like local communities develop and how like we can protect our vistas and our sort of create better public spaces. So yeah, for me, I'll be looking more on mayors and like barangay officials, because this is really what I think for me Cebu City needs. Bahala na kinsay mong president, basta ako I'll be focusing on the mayors and local officials. Also, sort of like I think other standards here are the I think this is more for ventilation and like natural light, where the building setback is done this way so that all of the buildings, all of the rooms in this sort of corridor or like street corridor will have access to natural ventilation, and we won't have something like this where, what do you call it? Let me zoom in a bit. Shift N. The reason why we want our buildings to taper as we go up, for example, like that, is so that each floor has ample access to natural light and then ventilation. But of course, the actual sort of building will look more like this. Now, we'll taper. Maybe this one is set back here and the rest of the building is like that. or maybe the building is just set up like this, like podium type, and it's set up like that. So ideally, everyone should have access to light and natural ventilation. So when you blow this up into like a street drawing, something like that, then you would have a setback that's like this. And ideally, to make this a good urban design, the building on the other side, let me just draw the street here, it's the street, would also be of a similar, let me just like try to get that building height there, similar building height. Sorry, it's getting really wonky. And really the main element of what determines these kinds of policies is our streets here. Now, people can gather here. There's space for like shops, space for like bicycle lanes, space for like sitting, space for trees. Usually the trees would be in between the vehicles and the people, sort of acting as a natural buffer. But in the middle of the road right of way, opposite to what's happening in Fuentes Mena, there really shouldn't be any planter boxes here. Because like as stated in the building code, the road right of way should be clear of any obstructions. I don't know whose idea was it to put the island there and put like a bunch of trees, but they clearly did not know what they were doing. They were just trying to maybe like nagpa what they call this, maybe just trying to get points with the local officials. I don't know who decided on that. Clearly it was a very, very bad idea. Not the worst though, like they're not like what do you call this, uh, could have been worse, could have been they put like something or like close down, or I don't know. I really can't think of like what could have been the it's actually pretty bad. The more I think about it, but this should be the ideal street. I think it's also um, I just realized this page here could also be the problem. This page here, this might be probably the first thing that needs to get updated as soon as possible, that this tree here in the middle should be placed on the street. And yeah, this needs to be updated. So this sort of development, it's good to have trees in your public spaces, but I think we can get more use out of the street if the trees were on the side, and then basically increasing the sidewalks. So the only users that are like benefiting from these trees are the drivers. So already you can see na the people weren't thinking, the people who made this law weren't thinking about the people on the sidewalk. They're thinking about the people in the cars. So much better on streets on the sidewalks, so like actually people on the sidewalk can use them, and then this won't be for the cars anymore. Okay, just a few more notes. Let's look at the SX design guide. I'll be sharing this with you hopefully later tonight. This is just something for you to like see. So the SX design guide, these are architectural details, talking about building forms. So this section considers form and design of individual buildings, a matter of architecture, because a major proportion of new buildings constructed in Essex are not designed by anyone with formal architectural training. It is legitimate to set out design requirements of the planning authority. So Essex is actually a place, if you didn't know, this is their design guide for their local community. So Essex Planning Officers Association. And it's probably one of the older cities in like London or like that area, UK. And they have a very sort of strong sort of building code or design guide. And as mentioned here, most of the sort of new construction isn't made by large companies who can afford architects. Actually, DIY sort of extensions to homes in their local community. So this is meant to like it is meant for non-architectural professionals, more sort of informal or like DIY sort of builders, carpenters, and basically the local community who can't afford like architectural services. So even in this sort of setting, you can already see na everyone is considered, not just those who have money, but those who are sort of living in like the old house that they want to extend their house. They can't afford an architect, so they do it themselves, something like that. So look at it: building materials, building heights, roof colors. It's all detailed here. And the people who create this design guide is the local council or the local government of Essex. They have like privacy achieved to like vegetation. They have sight lines, very clear sort of dimensions for that. And if you go through here, this is a 211-page document, basically tells you how to design for a local community. And the problem here, it's contextualized for a UK setting with like UK attitudes and culture. So the next step for us, aside from just like really changing our minds about how we plan our local environment, is to look at good practices abroad and sort of contextualize them to our own setting, like whether it be Cebu City, Butuan City, Bohol City, or wherever municipality you're from. So I think for my own sort of class, I really, and our class as well, we can spend time on this, maybe like a few weeks, maybe 2 weeks, to go through the designs being, the dimensions and standards being described here, compare them with the Philippine standards over here, and then compare them with Moten as well, because we pretty much went through half the book, and the rest of this book is just waterfront pretty much describes the same thing as squares, but with like bodies of water. Sustainable urban form, I think we all like are familiar with this. Visual analysis and case studies. Let me just check what's in sustainable urban form. Let's see, not 300, 200. Seafront. I don't know why that's a sustainable urban form. This is basically urban planning. We already discussed this. Talking about, let me see here. Let's see. Good public transport needs adequate density population to support good neighborhood facilities. So they're thinking about cities within a 500 to 600 meter radius. And then every sort of 500 or 600 meter radius, you have like a node sort of development or a major mall. Basically, again, encouraging public transportation and more cycling, more walking. 500 meters in UK. How long does it take to traverse 500 meters? Meters travel time. Let's see. So a car, it's 22.5 seconds, but I think for a person, 500 walking time. Let's see, walking speed about 6 minutes, 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Maybe for Filipinos, it will take about 10 minutes because we have shorter legs and thus like shorter strides. So they're really designing it like according to the non-vehicular traffic. Let me see over here. So basically what I've been saying since before, pa, like in our urban planning classes, that's basically it. We already discussed this. Less high rise, more low rise, medium dense coverage. So basically we already discussed that. I think I can like highlight it a bit, but this just goes to show that we're really, the European countries, the developed countries are really talking about this, reducing sort of building heights, but maintaining that density by making like smaller, more sort of what do you call this, friendlier community developments. And already we're seeing that here in Cebu, but they usually happen without the aid of the government. That's why we have the let's see, like these slum areas, not really slum areas, but low cost, low income sort of development areas. And like instead of saying that these are bad, well, technically in a way they are bad because they're not sort of supported, they're kind of left to themselves. Like if we could focus our building technology, our expertise to help these communities grow, we can actually impact a lot more people than those people who can only afford to live in IT Park, for example. So that's an example of what they call this, how sort of architecture can impact the community using principles of urban design. So in IT Park, very clean, very wide sidewalks, but really it only caters to a very select group of people. Maybe upper, if we're being generous, upper 40% of Cebuanos. I think 70% of Cebuanos live um, like this. live in these sort of neighborhoods. And then they really need our attention. So look at that guy on the roof there. And they're very prone to like fire, very prone to typhoon. Every time there's a natural disaster, it's these communities that pay the price. And then like as we all know, like they're kind of like left alone by the government. So it's our job as the educated, and because we're also Catholics, outreach, blah blah blah. This would be a very good thesis. Like, how do you incorporate ideas like being shown here in Moten, the SX Design Guide, and even to some extent, we're kind of running out of time. Development control plans in Sydney. So in like other developed countries like Sydney, these documents, community strategic plans, environmental strategy plans, city for all, socially just, blah blah blah. These are all like available to the public and share with you now. Uh, Compared to Cebu City Planning and Development Office, there's nothing. There are several reasons for this, probably because they don't have funding. Even the government itself doesn't think it's important to do this. So yeah, this needs to change. It has been like this like since I was in high school, but maybe it's about time. Like 20 years ago, it's been like this. But I think slowly, with the help of the faculty members of USC, other architects in Cebu who are Cebu based and maybe Manila, etc., the conversation is starting, and there's like a little bit of movement, and we can see that in the Metro Cebu roadmap, sustainability roadmap. No, roadmap. Roadmap. Ah, roadmap. There we go. But it's still at a very sort of large scale, very vague scale. So I'm sure I've shown you guys this last time. What is this? Oh, it's loading. Na this was proposed 2015. Na Cebu City, Mandaue City, Lapu-Lapu City will become the urban sort of work centers, commercial centers, with Liluan and Karkar being what they call the entertainment centers. Exactly what that means, it's like still pretty vague, but green buffers will be here in like Talisay, Cordova, Consolacion. So all very good ideas. It's a start, but really nothing so much on the street level. Like how do we design our streets? How do we improve our public spaces, sidewalks, etc., etc. So it's there, bro. It's not yet developed, and this is where you come in if you want to. Not forcing anyone to become urban designers and planners. I think I have a meeting in a bit. I don't know. They didn't send me the link, but yeah. So Lance, you're raising your hand, or like you just forgot to put it down. Okay. So I was checking my email. Sorry, accidentally press close slide. So for our final project, let's think about this. Is there an appropriate viewing distance of like your building for your building for your building in your design project? Does your building take into account the surrounding areas like design, heights, materials? Does your building have space for public gathering, whether it be a small plaza, park, or like proper streets where people can walk, and maybe even a bit of space for commercial areas along those streets, like small kiosks? Does your building encourage people to move around, or is it catering to vehicles? Like, is there a vehicle road like separating your like possible passengers for your terminal building to cross into your building? And then yes or no. So basically, if no, what could you do to improve it? You don't need to change your design because it's already there. But basically, the goal of this essay, we'll have an exam as well as a final. But the goal of this essay is really to make you think about how you design your buildings and how can you improve them using the principles we discussed already. So thinking about like plaza, streets, viewing distance, heights of your buildings, and minimum sort of dimensions or like preferred dimensions for plazas. So plazas can be as small as 20 by 20 even, but they can only go as big as 150, maybe even 200. Because if you go bigger, it becomes like an open parking lot and there's really not much activity to do there. That's maybe one criticism of the Fuente Osmeña circle. It's a bit too big. And now, because like there's no activities inside the plaza, it's become sort of this like park that people don't really go to, and then they kind of like made more mistakes by adding more trees, further separating it from the urban environment. So what we're trying to do is connect the different spaces around our building so that they're more walkable, more accessible, and really just more valuable. Okay, so that's my TED Talks for today. I'll stop recording here. I'll let you know